This is a BlackJupiter production produced by Agent Random. Hey, have you heard? A few weeks ago, word on the street was that Square and Disney are looking to make a movie based on Kingdom Hearts. This rumor actually started a couple years ago as a Disney Plus series, and from what I gather, the project has ever since been trapped in a place even worse than development hell. We're thinking about it hell. Anyway, looks like if the project's happening, it'll be a movie, and this has gotten every reaction under the sun from people. From hype to worry to all else in between. Now, something that you may not know about me is that I'm studying for a degree in film, and I like to use this channel as a sort of way to further educate myself for that degree. For example, I direct all the Lost videos on the channel, which is why they all look so bad. But the thought of making a Kingdom Hearts, or really just any JRPG, into a full blockbuster has been living rent-free in my mind for months. Like, this is the kind of stuff I go to school for, mixed with the thing that I spend too much of my day thinking about. This is my territory, and I find the whole topic to be just so fascinating. Actually, I already had a few different versions of this script done way back in March. You see, back then, there was this post on Square's X account, a platform whose name I will only be okay with if in 2 years Elon renames the site to Unchained X. But basically, occasionally at Square Enix asks for the opinions of the internet so that they can farm engagement and then take all of those responses and then turn them into a blog post for even more engagement. It's genius. But on the fateful day of March 5th, they asked the following.
If any Square Enix game were to be turned into a movie adaptation, which one would you advocate for, and why?
One of the replies stated that most Square Enix games just would not work as movies because they're too gosh dang long. Like, you know how much screen time you would have to dedicate just to showing every single phase that the final boss had the time to learn before the hero showed up? Square Enix responded with,
True, and we agree, to a point. But we do have stories that can be condensed, such as The World Ends With You, Live Alive, and the Mana games, etc. Thinking emoji.
And if you've seen my usual content on this channel, you know that I quite like talking about The World Ends With You. So I had this whole script together on how one should turn The World Ends With You into a movie or movie series, but after deliberating on if the topic was better suited for Kingdom Hearts, I came to the conclusion that I kind of wanted to focus on the wider concept of JRPG movies in general, especially since The World Ends With You movie is just a whim of whoever is managing Square's socials that day, and the Kingdom Hearts movie is just a rumor. But even if neither happen, someday solid JRPG movies will end up happening. And if any active or prospective filmmakers watching this want to be first on the scene, here are some of the things that you might want to consider doing. Now, to be clear on what I'm talking about when it comes to a JRPG movie, I'm referring to a movie more in line with what, say, Disney would consider to be one of their big movies for the season, and less so an anime movie. We will talk about anime, but I find the idea of Hollywood trying their best to explain what the mark of the recusant is to a general audience to be much more fascinating as a discussion point. Oh, and when it comes to TV, a lot of my points will apply to that too, but for this video I really do want to focus in on a roughly 2-hour cinematic experience. Now, usually when people hear the idea of their favorite spiky-haired sword wielder hitting the big screen, it's immediately flagged as a bad idea. But I have a belief that in storytelling, there are no bad ideas, just ideas that are harder to get right. And this is without a doubt one of those. But I'm much more interested in thinking about what's necessary for the execution of a strange idea rather than the validity of the idea in the first place. I really do think that with the correct approach, any adaptation is fully possible. Yes, even that one, dear commenter. Whatever JRPG you were about to throw at me, yes to that one. Do I think it'll be easy? No, but pick your favorite one anyway, and play along with these steps to see just how it might make the journey to true cinema. So, step 1, you need a director. Do not even think about trying to adapt to one of these suckers unless you got a director that loves the source material. Same honestly goes for the screenwriter too. Getting a big name director, or even worse, whoever you think will be cheapest so that you can minimize risk, and just telling them to play a few hours of Kingdom Hearts 1 on beginner is not going to fly here. If you're making a Kingdom Hearts movie, you need someone that's made a Who's She On joke at least once in their life. If it's The World Ends With You, you need someone who knows full well about countdown trauma. If you're getting a director for the Persona 5 movie and they don't know what you're talking about when you bring up pancakes, you have the wrong person. But at the same time, don't just go and grab one of the game's devs. I know it sounds sacrilege to not put someone like Nomura in the director seat of a Kingdom Hearts project, but you should be aiming for a big fan of the source material that also has plenty experience in directing films. To focus on Nomura more, I know he did direct the film Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. Now, I am not a Final Fantasy fan, nor have I seen Advent Children, but from what I gather, the movie is best enjoyed by Final Fantasy VII fans, and won't really captivate anyone who hasn't played any of the games. That's not really what I'm aiming for here. But in the cases where a series' creative vision all mostly stems from a singular voice like Nomura or Yoko Taro projects, then they should be still on hand to give that creative vision to this project as well. But preferably in a producer role, so that the director can take those ideas and make them work in a movie. This is what Nintendo and Illumination did with the Mario movie. It was directed by Aaron Horvath and Michael Jelenic, but Shigeru Miyamoto kept a close eye as the producer. Okay, so you have a director who's a huge fan of the game and the game's original creator keeping them on a leash. What's next? Step 2. Know who the movie is for and what it will accomplish when they watch it. I'm gonna suggest a priority list as follows. The top priority is to appeal to the general audience of whatever your target demographic is. If you're doing Kingdom Hearts, you want to appeal to all ages. If you're doing The World Ends With You, you really want to hit the middle and high schoolers. And if you're doing Persona, you want to appeal to the late teens, early 20s crowd. So on and so forth. The JRPG versions of these stories already hit those demographics, but in a more niche and nerdy sense. Film as a medium has a more positive public perception than games, and is seen as something that anyone can enjoy. That is to say, movies are often expected to appeal to people outside of the niche. Make sure that you can grab them. This is our adaptation's #1 priority. But what about the die-hard fans? JRPGs are known for having wacky and deep lore, and you can't just sanitize that out in order to appeal to people
who only have the Nintendo Switch and claim to be gamers.
Don't worry. Priority 2 is still not appealing to the die-hard crowd, actually. It's making sure that those casual viewers that you roped in are shown the depths of the franchise's appeal. Show them what's made the core fans fall in love with the series to begin with. Show them the heart. This helps enable many of those casual viewers to go and pick up other pieces of media from the same franchise, like the games. At the time of writing the script, that's exactly what the Fallout show is doing. Fallout 4 is sold out everywhere because the show made wandering the wasteland seem cool and people wanted more. Also in that same vein, this can create demand for sequels and spin-offs for the movie. Just do me a solid and don't go overboard with making the Xenoblade movie a blatant commercial for the Xenoblade 2 movie to such a degree that you forget you still have to make the first one good. And then priority 3, appeal to the core fans. While assuming that you followed priority 1 correctly, they won't make up a bulk of the tickets sold, they are going to be the loudest voices talking about the movie, so make sure that you service those fans just the right amount. Again, do not go overboard by making the movie just a 2-hour collection of Easter eggs, but also don't make your film entirely alien to the source material. There is a balance there. And luckily, you should be able to easily achieve that balance since the director that you got is simultaneously a huge fan of the games and knows what makes a movie that people will actually like. Lucky you. Step 3 to make the JRPG movie, what does it look like? If you're out here trying to pioneer the JRPG blockbuster, I highly advise that you go animated. There are benefits to doing a live-action movie, and it totally could work for really any property. Even those games with very distinctive art styles can still have a strong visual direction in live action. But I think making a good JRPG movie itself is already a tall order. Trying to figure out how much anime hair makes it onto set is just another thing that could very much go wrong. Once the industry gets a really good grasp on how to tell a strong story with a JRPG adaptation, then maybe we can talk about going live action. But we're not even close to there yet. Oh, and for the record, rumor is that the Kingdom Hearts movie is not entirely animated, and I am not a happy camper there. Step 4, writing the screenplay. This is going to be the hardest part and is going to take a bit of explaining from me because it invites the very loaded question of what makes a good adaptation. And honestly, I kind of have beef with how adaptation is most commonly approached in media. Assuming that we're not having the US military discover video game world or something as if we're allergic to the source material, typically the approach is to take the source material and then sort of bend and contort it until it fits within the new medium. But here's the thing, when creating any form of art, it will naturally take advantage of the strengths of the medium that it was created for, while also avoiding that medium's shortcomings. That is to say that the Mona Lisa's OST kinda sucks, but it's much prettier to look at than the contents of The Great Gatsby. If you copy and paste a piece of media from one medium into another and then start cutting out or altering the parts that don't work anymore, the final product as a whole is just going to feel awkward and out of place. You want an example of that? As I'm sure many subscribers here are familiar with, The World Ends With You's anime adaptation got flack left and right for trying to condense a 20-hour story into just over 4. Things felt rushed, unfresh, and just inferior. Even if you didn't play the game, it was clear that this is just not how the story was meant to be told. And I'm saying this as someone that thinks the show is pretty underrated, but that's a thing. Like I said, it does a pretty good job appealing to psychos like me who will spend 40 minutes talking about how that jacket on the windowsill is an armor piece from the game, but not to normal people. This is mostly why I discounted anime earlier. I know a good few JRPGs have anime adaptations, and many of those are also movies. Is that not exactly what I'm trying to accomplish here? Not really. You see, anime as a genre is already mostly adaptations, in that case typically from manga. But the norm in anime is basically to never stray from the source material if you don't have to. And that usually works since manga and television share a lot of DNA in their story structure. A one-to-one conversion is very doable and very recommended. Most games don't share that DNA, so don't try to do a one-to-one conversion when adapting one. You're not trying to be the same as the game or even to be better than the game. If you try to aim for either of those, the story will look like a fish out of water all floppy and making smells. Your goal should be to authentically recreate the story from the ground up in a new medium. And you're only going to get there in the first place if you, as the filmmaker, have a story worth telling. One that can only be told in the way that you are trying to tell it. And by that I mean a movie. I apologize if I'm stressing this point a lot, but I imagine that this is particularly tricky for most screenwriters and something that audiences don't all realize. There is a misconception that an adaptation is good because it stays faithful to its source material and that a bad adaptation strays from its source material. This is not true. A good adaptation is one that can authentically bring a story from one medium and make it feel like it belongs in another. To prioritize source material authenticity is to risk the story not feeling like it belongs. Square peg and a round hole deal. And JRPGs in particular are more like trapezoid pegs. It's harder than it would be for already hard adaptations. I've observed that people generally have a hard time picturing what a good JRPG adaptation would look like and, as a result, immediately resign off the idea of one happening in the first place. I mean, let's be real, video game adaptations in general are still in their infancy. If you're going to adapt a game, it's a much safer bet to adapt something in a genre that's already proven to work. Adapt a Last of Us type that you can basically just port over word for word, or a Nintendo game that doesn't really need a strong story to get the job done. Why even adapt a JRPG in the first place? And it's because sooner or later, Hollywood is going to run out of those types of games to adapt. One day, they're going to start looking around for other games with rich stories, and the more time that passes, the more the world of JRPGs will become difficult to ignore. And that's when they're going to have to ask the difficult question of how in the absolute heck do you tell one of those stories on the silver screen? Because the answer to that question does not come easy. And I think that's just because there aren't really any strong examples of how it should be done. A method has not been created. The medium has not yet been innovated in that way. And one day it will. I really do think so. But to get there, it's going to take probably a lot of trial and error. So when the film industry does eventually get there, this is what I imagine they would have to do to make the story of their adaptation rock solid. To do this, I recommend letting go of the idea of doing the story in the same way that the game did. Saying, nah, I'ma do my own thing. Actually, comic book movies, but more specifically Spider-Verse, are great examples to go off of. Because one of the last complaints that you'll hear about a comic book movie is that it felt just like a worse version of any specific comic book. In fact, the quality of a comic book adaptation is rarely compared to the quality of its source material. When it comes to Spider-Verse, aside from being a stellar set of movies, they are also probably my favorite examples of an adaptation, so I want to see if I can learn lessons from it for the sake of our discussion here. The Spider-Verse movies are adaptations, but they know they can't be the original Spider-Verse comic event, or the Spider-Wars cartoon arc, or the original Miles Morales run, so they tell their story in a way that was their own. But honestly, Spider-Man's a relatively easy character to adapt. The fact that the story has already been told in so many ways over the years lets writers feel like they have the freedom to do whatever they want with the character. Movie Miles is not the same as comic Miles, but no one expected him to be. He still feels authentically Miles telling an authentically Spider-Man story, and he thrives as a result of it. I believe that there is no reason why this is possible with Miles, but not with Sora, or Neku, or 2B, or freaking Byleth. Actually, quick sidebar, Three Houses? You're doing at least a 3-season TV series. You'd waste so many opportunities by doing a movie instead, so do one over my dead body. Got it? Cool. Anyway, if the topic of adaptation in general really interests you, I highly recommend the video linked in the eye icon by Tail Foundry that goes into this idea in more detail. I came across the video after writing this part of the script, and they go deeper into a lot of the points that I just brought up, so give it a watch once you're done here. Okay, so I've explained the thought process of adapting a game, but how do you do it in practice? Well, in preparation for this script, I performed a few writing exercises to help put me in the shoes of a writer tasked with this job. My guinea pig was the World Ends With You, since this video started life as a World Ends With You video. I took a page out of Square's book and asked my own Union X account at Agent Random for what they thought the best thing about the World Ends With You was, so that I may too farm engagement. The two most common things that people said were the best things about the World Ends With You was the music and the growth that the characters underwent. Most notably in the case of lead character Neku. Many players, especially those in their teens, really related with Neku. And a just a sizable amount of people also claimed that the character Shiki Misaki from the Twelve Ends With You was the best part of the game. So if I was directing a World Ends With You movie, I would strip the World Ends With You down to just those essentials that people most commonly mentioned, but also only the essentials that could easily work in a movie. I got a number of people talking about how they found various gameplay elements to be the best part of the World Ends With You, but since they can't be the foundation of a movie, we shouldn't somehow try to make them a foundation. I'm not saying to disregard harder to implement elements like gameplay altogether, but just don't build the whole movie around them. One of the biggest issues that the final product could have is audiences that never played the game thinking that a part of the movie would be better in the game. If we have an over-reliance on gameplay elements that would otherwise have no business in a movie, that's exactly what will happen. There is an argument to be made for the gimmick of the movie being that it uses so many gameplay elements to tell its story, almost like a parody. But like I said in the animation versus live action point, that's just making an already hard task even more difficult. It can be done well, but I don't recommend trying just yet. Anyway, take those core elements and make them the core of the movie. Those 2 or 3 things that you gathered should be what the movie is about no matter what. They are the story that you are trying to tell. Disregard all else. Then once you have that locked in, start rebuilding the whole rest of the story outward from there from scratch. Build the supporting cast, important locations, etc. And luckily again, the director's a huge fan of the source material, so they should organically be implementing all of the non-core elements of the source as they go along. Man, hiring that director sure was a good call. But if you find that you need help actually building the rest of the plot, then no worries. There's a whole industry of great examples to build from. I recommend first looking at Pixar's 22 Rules of Storytelling because go figure, Pixar knows how to make a good story. My favorite of these rules is rule number 4, which is less a rule and more of a series of fill-in-the-blanks. Once upon a time, there was blank every day, blank, one day, blank because of that, blank because of that, blank until finally, blank. This is the basic framework that just about every good film fits snugly inside of, and ideally, your JRPG adaptation should do so as well. You'll probably notice that most JRPGs you can think of do not fit inside those blanks. Like I said before, you'd be lucky if the final boss alone fits into those blanks. So I took on another exercise to achieve the Pixar seal of approval. And yes, I know not every good movie needs to fit into the same sort of structure, but for the sake of practice, I find this to be helpful. I went and took a look at a lot lot of my favorite movies and I broke them down into templates, like Into the Spider-Verse for example. I denoted that this movie has 2 characters with focal arcs, that being Miles and Peter B. I named them Character A and Character B respectively. Then I also noted that there are 4 characters with a lot of screen time but not nearly as much of a focal arc, those being Looney Tunes Spidey, Evangelion Spidey, Gwen Stacy, and Nick Cage Spidey. Then I divided the movie's plot points into whether or not they were scenes focused on action, character, exposition, or something else. So when it comes to Into the Spider-Verse, you start out with a high action opening, some exposition that establishes normalcy for character A, action scene, exposition that serves as characterization for character B, action scene, character building for character A, action scene, darkest hour for both character A and character B, character A seizes the proverbial sword, action scene where character A proves her growth, and resolution. I actually did this for the second movie too and found that the first fight against a Spot is action, character, and exposition focused all at once, and it does so flawlessly that I didn't even notice until this exercise. This isn't relevant, but I don't get too many chances to gush about Spider-Man here, so yeah. Anyway, once I had a framework down, I plugged in the elements of whatever JRPG I was trying to adapt and started connecting the dots. So if I was doing The World Ends With You, I know that my 2 most important characters are Neku and Shiki, so they would become character A and character B. And then all the other notable characters from the game would start taking up the slots of the other notable characters from the movie without as much development. By doing this method, you'll for sure wind up leaving out major elements or be needing to fill up a slot where the JRPG has nothing to fill it with. That's okay. For example, say I'm putting Kingdom Hearts into a template like this and I somehow don't have anywhere to put Riku. Obviously, no Kingdom Hearts adaptation is going to leave out my man Riku, but for the exercise, try your best and make the best story you can without him. Because the ultimate goal here is just to teach yourself different ways of telling the story of Kingdom Hearts. Maybe you give some of his stuff to Kairi or Goofy or what have you. Not ideal, but just do your best. Once you have that outline together, get a new movie and do it again. I did this for other Spider-Man movies, Toy Stories, The Last Puss in Boots, even Suzume, which is a movie that I do not like but do find to have good narrative structure. Am I bleeding credibility by saying that I think The World Ends With You anime is underrated while also saying that Suzume is overrated in the same video? Yeah, but it's probably too late now. Once you do this enough times, you'll begin to paint yourself a picture of what parts of the source are absolutely necessary to tell the kind of story that you want to tell, how to use those elements to tell the kind of story that you want to tell, and new ways to use other story elements that you might not have otherwise thought of. Once you have all of that, congratulations! You've developed a good base for a first draft. From there, you can start giving more specific attention to other parts of the narrative that need work done on them and keep on developing from there. There's more work to be done, but getting a strong foundation is one of the most crucial parts of the process. Now, I know that making this kind of story in reality would be much more complicated than this, and I know that I am not a professional in the industry. These are just the crazed ramblings of a guy on YouTube that you decided to listen to for some reason. But yeah, I know that if an adaptation of Kingdom Hearts or whatever hits a silver screen, there's every chance that it won't have the thought or care put into it that I just did. And even if it does, in this industry, you have corporate higher-ups who can trump your own creative decisions. Most studios probably want to play things really safe and just do things as closely to the games as possible. But a project like this is only going to survive through innovation. Looking back at the X back cover post of Square's, they said that The World Ends With You or the Mana games would be a good fit for film because they're easier to condense. I just went on a whole tangent about how that is fundamentally the wrong approach to this whole thing. Obviously, they are not going to be getting this whole thing right without a struggle. But I have to dream that someday, someone will show the world how this kind of film is done. I know that right now, it's hard to picture it correctly. If you take your favorite JRPG and think about if it was a movie, you're immediately going to think of all the things that would be lost in translation. But movies, just like video games, are a beautiful form of storytelling. If the right person takes enough advantage of the art of filmmaking, they'll wind up pumping out scenes so captivating that all of a sudden, it's the game that wouldn't be able to do that sort of thing the same way. But we're not there yet. I just hope that someday we will be there. Now, I did kind of frame this video around Kingdom Hearts because I kind of wanted to go in more detail on what I would do if I was directing a Kingdom Hearts movie. But this video is already long as is, so I'll just give some brief notes on that real quick. Assuming that we're adapting Kingdom Hearts 1 and not letting Nomura do something freaking weird like commissioning Pixar to reanimate the 358 over 2 days cutscene movie, take influence again from the Spider-Verse movies and change up the art style from world to world, but also only have 3 Disney World visits at absolute maximum and contain retained Kingdom Hearts' original plot mostly within them. That is to say, eradicate Traverse Town from existence and place its storyline into the Great Before from Seoul or something. I don't know. Also, don't feel forced to only use Disney worlds in Kingdom Hearts 1. If you think that Sora's Kingdom Hearts 1 journey could benefit from meeting the Robinsons for some freaking reason, then let yourself do that. Also, don't feel pressured to heavily include the Final Fantasy cast, but if you do end up omitting them, then lay on the Final Fantasy Easter eggs thick to satiate their fans. And lastly, scrap the whole production if it can't get Utada. I'll be honest, I have a ton of notes on how I would handle entire film and TV franchises based on Kingdom Hearts and The World Ends With You. So if you're at all interested in hearing me go into further detail on those subjects, please let me know in the comments. Like seriously, I think about this all the time and genuinely have no clue if anyone's actually interested in hearing what I'd do if I got handed the Kingdom keys to these sorts of projects. So please let me know. And before I say goodbye, special thank you to ZettaSlow for cameoing once again as the voice of Square Enix itself. He just started a new channel recently, you guys should really go check it out. And of course, special thanks to our ever so patient patrons, Bacon Insert Down Here, Kaiser, Willpower784, Wonderland Snack, The Missing Samurai, and Ven. Remember that Arcane is not an adaptation of a JRPG, nor is it an adaptation to begin with. Pokemon is a temporal anomaly, and that if you commented before watching the whole video, it's okay, I still love you. I will see you next time.